Welcome to another episode of Sanford Says. My name is Lisa Holder, Communications Officer for the City of Sanford. And today we have the pleasure of having Julie Scofield on the show. Julie is the City of Sanford's Historic Preservation Planner. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Lisa.
We are so glad that you're here. We're interested in learning about historic preservation. Just probably touching the tip of the iceberg, because Sanford, we know, is a historic city. Julie works in the Planning and Development Department here at the City of Sanford. And you have been with the city how long, Julie?
Since January.
Since January. So we welcome you here, just a few months. And Julie's going to talk to us about why actually historic preservation is really important, and of course about our historic districts and landmarks throughout the city, some of the ordinances as it relates to historic preservation. We do have a historic preservation board here at the City of Sanford, and also this month is a very special month. It's no coincidence we have Julie on in the month of May, because it is
National Historic Preservation Month.
Hooray!
Yes.
Okay, so Julie, please just share with us by starting on the topic of historic preservation and why it's important.
Well, that's always a good question, because there's some people who haven't caught on to the fact that it is important. If we look at the buildings that we have in Sanford, we have to see those as being non-renewable resources. So, people become very emotional and sad, for instance, if they lose a forest. But in truth, we can replant trees. But these historic buildings, once they're gone, they cannot be recreated, and we can't, the memories that are associated with those, the events, the people, all the emotions are lost as well. So when we think of them that way, they're very precious and different.
So actually buildings do have an emotional connection, believe it or not, to people. It's a place, and you always would have an emotional connection.
And it has to do with people's identity. It's very important. It triggers our memories. It has a lot of psychological benefit. People want to belong. They want to have identity. They want some connection to their roots. But in addition to that, it's a good investment to protect these buildings. They were, the people who built them had aspirations for them to set a standard and to last for a very long time. The founders of this town were creating a legacy, and so we already have a lot of investment in that over time. And by preserving them, we're essentially, recycling them for new uses, and all of that is good makes good business sense.
Sure, and it encourages reinvestment and all of that.
Right.
That's wonderful. And so we are very, I should say, proud of our historic buildings, yes, residential district, commercial districts, and just our town in general. Could you share a little bit more with our listeners about Sanford's historic districts? People may think or may know of one, but there are a couple or a few.
Right. Sure, we have two. We have the downtown commercial historic district, which is also a National Register historic district, and it's what you would think of as the basic core downtown. It has 26 buildings in it. And then adjoining that, we have the Sanford Residential Historic District that has over 400 buildings in that. And so that's roughly 3rd Avenue to 13th between Laurel and Sanford Avenues. And the buildings, mostly houses, but also churches and schools, were built between the 1880s and the 1940s. And that district is really enhanced as well by the beautiful tree canopy and the brick streets.
And how can you share some of the background on how that particular area of our city did become a residential historic district, or even the downtown, or what went in that, and how long have we been designated that?
Well, these were both placed on the National Register, actually the Downtown Historic District in 1976, which was the bicentennial year, and there was a lot of national interest in these historic places. And so that local district received that designation then, and then later the city determined that was also a local district. Because most people don't understand, the National Register is an honorific listing. It's places that deserve to be preserved, but it has no restrictions or regulations, so it doesn't actually protect them. It's only the local designation that can do that. And so
Okay.
the same is true of the residential district. That was a National Register district later in the 90s, and then it was also adopted as a local district so that it could be protected.
And that's because, is it because the residents came together and pushed
Yes,
forth this effort?
Right. And majority of the owners have to approve of both of these designations.
And the as it relates to the ordinance called Schedule S, I know you were going to be talking about that and our historic designation for the residential area and even downtown commercial. Can you expand upon that?
Right. Schedule S is the method that we use to protect these properties and to ensure the investment. It's very important because if you are going to fix up and take care of your building, you want it to be a viable business or your home, then it's encouraging to know that your neighbors have the same values in this regard. And so the purpose of Schedule S is to protect these buildings over time. And it's based on the National Park Service has a set of guidelines. And essentially these are some very, kind of common sense standards to protect historic properties, to preserve their historic character and their distinct character while meeting new needs. So we're allowing them to change. I mean, you think about it, none of these buildings when they were built had air conditioning, and now they all do. Mm-hmm. So as time goes on, modern needs change. So in order to keep buildings occupied and preserved, we have to figure out ways to adapt them. So mm-hmm. It's all a kind of adaptive use of historic properties. So that's kind of the underlying philosophy of Schedule S.
And could the area actually expand into other portions that are kind of adjacent or in proximity to the historic downtown? Could there be add-ons or no? Just wondering because there's several historic homes surrounding the district at downtown.
There's a possibility for expansion. What you're looking at when you do that, in all districts, the whole is greater than the parts. So you want them to be of comparable age and similar qualities without too many gaps in that area. But if property owners are interested in that, that's always a possibility to do that, because we do have some wonderful properties at the edges of these districts as well.
Right. So, Julie, more about your historic preservation board.
Yes.
There's a group of volunteers
right.
that actually help to, I don't want to say enforce, but guide these regulations and have experience just like yourself in the very important topic of historic preservation.
Yeah, I think some people have misunderstandings about how that process works and what the role of the preservation board is. I mean, I occasionally get people who say, "Oh, I want to do this to my house, but the preservation board won't let me," or something, or "I'm afraid to go before the preservation board," or "We can't do anything." But that's incorrect. We do require what's called a certificate of appropriateness for any changes within the district. So that's from things as simple as repairs and paint, all the way up to additions or new construction. And so some of those can be reviewed at the staff level, essentially like with like type things, re-roofing, that sort of things. But when we're making a more substantial change, then those go before the Historic Preservation Board. And their purpose really is to use and apply these guidelines in a problem-solving sense. Because no property is going to be perfect. Everyone is different. Again, the needs of the owners change, and so it's using these guidelines, this framework, to make good decisions, again, to protect the basic integrity of these houses, but to meet modern needs.
And what type of houses do we have here, architecture-wise, in the historic district? There's different styles, I would imagine.
There's different styles. There's some Mediterranean Revival. There's some Queen Anne. The majority of some bungalows or craftsman-style homes, and then the majority of what's something that we call frame vernacular. And essentially, these homes were not designed by architects. So this is just what in the times that they were built, many people had these same carpentry and building skills, and they were just building what they liked, maybe based on something they'd seen in the Sears catalog or where they'd lived before they came to Florida. So it's just their own interpretations using the materials that were easily available.
And speaking of materials, that's very important in these historic homes, correct? That's part of the
We're
Schedule
trying
S.
to repair rather than replace as often as we can for that.
Yeah, and you speak of these, it sounds interesting to learn that people actually designed their own homes back in those days, and that's, I think, what makes it so quaint and unique when you drive through the historic district downtown. They're just absolutely beautiful, the homes, and the residents have kept them up so well, extraordinary. So, and that has to do with the city of Sanford and the Historic Preservation Board and all of that, and so you can see for yourself visually the results of all of the hard work behind it and those quaint street lights. But that's a project with the Historic Trust, right?
Sanford
So
Historic Trust.
Can you talk about that as it relates to just how that's a separate entity? It's a nonprofit that's not a city organization, but they work along with the city to make sure that...
They're essentially an advocacy group. So they're standing up for and promoting historic preservation. They'll do activities this month, they're helping educate the homeowners. A lot of the people involved in the trust live in the district. And again, these street lights are something that they've been doing for a number of years that are really beautiful enhancement to the neighborhood.
And speaking of this month, Historic Preservation Month, this place matters. Are there some of the events going on would be...
This Place Matters is an interesting campaign. It's from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and there's been a National Preservation Month since 1973. But in the last few years, the hashtag This Place Matters has been the theme each year for Preservation Month. So you can go on their website and print out your This Place Matters placards, which are orange and white, and then people are encouraged to take themselves and these cards along with their family and friends, neighbors, and take a photo of yourself in front of places that matter to you.
Okay, so where would they get? What website are we talking about?
It's the National Trust for Historic Preservation has a Preservation Month link.
Okay.
And you can download all these.
Just Google the name?
Just Google that.
Okay.
And so then you're taking these photos, sharing your stories, uploading this to social media, and telling the story of these buildings. Why is this important? This is the theater I had my first kiss in. This is where I graduated from school. This is the home I grew up in.
Right. And what years are we talking about that would make something historic? Is there
50 years?
50 years.
Is generally the threshold for that.
Okay. And we also mentioned earlier about landmarks. Can you talk about any city landmarks that we have? Mm-hmm. Do we have any?
We do. And they're separate from the districts. So, for example, the St. James AME Church, the Hopper Academy, the St. Lanta entryway feature have all been locally designated. And so they also receive protections so that if they were to be altered or demolished, then they would have a review process as well to help protect them.
So that means they have any changes by people that live in the communities or live near there or interested have to go through the city of Sanford?
Right, so they'll follow, Schedule S will apply to those.
And these are city landmarks, not...
Yes, but some of them are also on the National Register.
Okay. And so these places and these areas, historic homes, could people that are not in the district but do have an historic home apply for a national designation for their home or anything like that? And I also heard, correct me if I'm wrong, that we have historic trees in our city that are over close to 100 years old that are considered historic and could be designated landmarks. I heard that.
I don't know about that. Local homes, it's the criteria for that has to do with significance. So if it's associated with a significant event, a significant person, or a very unique type of architecture, then it could be an individual landmark.
All right. Is there anything else Julie, that you'd like to add at this time? I know that you're going to be back on the show again, but we definitely wanted to have our historic preservation planner on board here on the show because that's what Sanford's known as. We are an historic city.
Yes. Well,
Beautiful
because this
city.
is Preservation Month, I have some suggestions for celebrating.
Okay.
One of the things people can do is please do these photos and share them, but you can also shop Main Street. You can take yourself to lunch at a restaurant in a historic property. You can speak up for special places that are threatened by demolition or some sort of other type of destruction. And or you can, this is Sanford, so you can definitely raise a glass to historic preservation in a historic bar.
Great. That's good. Great recommendations. And so I wanted to mention that the Historic Preservation Board does meet. It's a public meeting.
They meet once a month.
They meet once a month. Third Wednesday at 5:30 at City Hall, 300 North Park Avenue. Our agendas are posted online in advance of the meetings if you wanted to see what topics were being discussed and decided upon. So, well, very wonderful. There you have it.
Yes.
Julie Scofield, Historic Preservation Planner. So glad you can be here today, and we will have Julie on the show again for sure because there's other great opportunities and things happening in our historic districts. Well, thanks again, Julie. This is Lisa Holder, Communications Officer for the City of Sanford. You can find the City of Sanford podcast on our website, sanfordfl.gov/podcast, and on our social media, and as well on Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, that's a new one, and iHeartRadio. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.